Have you ever felt that real pull, between two big things, maybe duty versus what you really want, or like some higher calling versus just, well, sticking with the world you know?
Yeah, that tension is pretty universal, isn't it?
It really is. And today, you're joining us for a deep dive into this incredible story about a prince, Nanda. He's literally on the edge of his own wedding day, and boom, his life just gets completely rewritten by this unexpected intervention.
It is a fascinating narrative.
Our journey today, it's based on these ancient texts. Specifically, there's a Buddhist commentary, the Nandattheravatthu. And our mission really is to explore the surprising methods used here. Almost counterintuitive ways someone is guided towards deeper understanding.
Definitely not what you might expect.
Right. We'll look at how a promise that seems, frankly, a bit superficial, can actually spark this profound inner change. And how a mind, described in the text as ill-thatched, we'll get into what that means, can become totally resilient to the desires that used to rule it.
And to set the scene, the teacher, so the Buddha, he's just come back to his hometown, Kapilavatthu, after his enlightenment. He's got a big group of monks with him.
Okay.
And he's already had a big impact on his own family. His father, King Suddhodana, his aunt, Mahapajapati Gautami, they're already on the path at different stages. So the stage is really set for some more interesting family dynamics.
What an incredible setup. So the teacher's back, family's waking up spiritually, and then what happens with Prince Nanda's wedding? It sounds like it's in full swing.
Oh, absolutely. It's Nanda's big day. You've got the anointing ceremony. He's entering the house. The marriage rites are happening. It's all going on. And right in the middle of this, the teacher shows up for alms.
Just walks in.
Pretty much. He goes up to Nanda and he just places his alms bowl right into Nanda's hands.
Okay.
And then he just turns and walks away. Doesn't take the bowl back.
Wow. That's bold. Almost disruptive, isn't it?
It is. And Nanda, he has such deep reverence for the teacher. He just can't bring himself to say, hey, excuse me, you forgot your bowl.
Right. So he's stuck there, holding this bowl. What does he do?
He follows him. He keeps thinking, okay, maybe he'll take it back on the stairs. Or at the bottom of the stairs. Or, out in the courtyard.
But he never does.
Never does. Nanda's clearly reluctant to keep following, you can imagine. But that respect is just too strong. It's like this silent command he feels compelled to obey.
Meanwhile, while this sort of strange silent procession is happening, word gets back to Nanda's fiancée. The text calls her the Dhammapada, basically the most beautiful woman around.
Right, the beauty of land.
And someone tells her, hey, the teacher is leading Nanda away, so she rushes out, get this hair half done, weeping.
Yeah, quite a dramatic image.
And she calls out, come back quickly, my prince. And the text says that plea just hit him right in the heart, landed athwart his heart. Must have been powerful.
Oh, absolutely. Her words really affect him. But the teacher still hasn't taken the bowl. He leads Nanda all the way to the monastery.
All the way there, holding the bowl.
Yeah.
And once they arrive, he just turns to Nanda and asks, quite simply, will you ordain, Nanda?
Just like that, after everything.
Just like that. And again, Nanda, totally overcome by respect, doesn't really feel he can say no. He replies, yes, venerable sir, I will ordain.
Wow.
And the teacher tells the other monks, okay, ordain him. And that's it. Prince Nanda, on his wedding day, becomes a monk.
That is something else. You have to wonder, though, was that really Nanda's choice? I mean, that method, compelling him purely through his own reverence. What do you make of that?
It does feel quite coercive from our perspective, doesn't it? It's not a direct order, but it definitely leverages Nanda's deep-seated respect.
Is that like a common teaching strategy, using respect like that?
It's often described as an example of the teacher's skillful means, upaya. The idea is meeting people where they are. He understands Nanda's character, what motivates him, what holds him. It wasn't about brute force, but about using this very specific situation, this powerful reverence Nanda felt as the initial doorway, you could say. A doorway he might not have walked through otherwise.
Exactly. But the story doesn't stop there. Only 7 days later, there's another royal ordination.
Oh, really? Who this time?
This time it's Rahula, the teacher's own son.
His son. Okay, how does that happen?
Well, Rahula's mother sends him to the teacher. She tells him, go ask your father for your inheritance. She reminds him, you're a prince. You're meant to be a great king, a universal monarch. You need wealth.
So a very practical, worldly request.
Very much so. And Rahula goes. He approaches the teacher, shows affection like a young boy would, and then just keeps following him around saying, give me my inheritance. Ascetic, give me my inheritance.
That's a persistent kid.
He is. And what's really interesting is what the text tells us the teacher is thinking. He recognizes Rahula is asking for worldly stuff, wealth, power, which he sees as just, tied up in the cycle of suffering, always bringing trouble and anxiety with it.
Right. It's subject to the cycle of existence and accompanied by vexation, as the text puts it. So he decides on a different kind of inheritance.
A completely different kind, a radical one, really. He decides, I'm going to give him the inheritance I gained under the Bodhi tree. This sevenfold noble treasure. Faith, virtue, learning, generosity, wisdom, and so on.
Wow. Not golden jewels, but inner wealth.
Precisely. He wants to make Rahula an heir to a supramundane inheritance, a spiritual legacy, not a material one.
So how does he do that?
He instructs one of his chief disciples, Sariputta, to ordain Rahula. And just like that, Rahula becomes a novice monk. It really highlights the stark contrast between worldly inheritance, which fades, and spiritual inheritance, which lasts.
You can only imagine how King Suddhodana felt. First his relative Nanda, now his own grandson Rahula, both gone off to be monks.
Exactly. The king is understandably very distressed. He goes to the teacher, his son, and basically says, look, this is too much. He requests a new rule be established.
Okay.
That no son should be ordained without getting permission from his parents first.
And the teacher agrees.
He does. He grants that request. It becomes part of the monastic code. The text also mentions the king recalling some past doubts he'd had, which leads the teacher to tell an old story, a jātaka tale, about believing truth. But the main point is this rule about parental permission comes directly from the king's grief here.
Okay, so back to Nanda.
Yeah.
He's been ordained, maybe not entirely willingly at first. He's now living as a monk at the Jetavana monastery. How's he doing? Is he settling in?
Not well. Not well at all, actually. Pretty quickly, he becomes really unhappy, deeply discontented. He starts telling the other monks, look, I can't do this. I can't stick with this holy life. I want to go back. I want to return to lay life.
Uh-oh. So the initial method, the respect-based ordination, didn't exactly stick?
It got him through the door, but it didn't change his heart. Not yet. So the teacher gets wind of this and asks him directly, Nanda, what's wrong? Why are you discontent?
And what does Nanda say? Does he admit it?
He does. He confesses. He says he's longing for his Sakyan princess, that beautiful fiancée. He can't get her parting words out of his head. Come back quickly, my prince. They're just echoing constantly for him.
Wow. So that image, that plea, is still incredibly powerful for him.
It raises a big question, then, doesn't it? How do you motivate someone who's taken vows but is still so strongly pulled by worldly attachment?
Exactly. And this is where the teacher's methods get, well, even more unconventional. Some might even say shocking.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What does he do?
He takes Nanda by the arm and, using his psychic powers, his Iti powers, he transports him. They basically fly towards the Tavatimsa heaven, one of the god realms.
Wow, okay, a field trip to heaven.
Sort of, but with a couple of very specific stops along the way. First, as they're traveling, they pass over this burned-out field, and the teacher points down to this charred tree stump where there's this monkey sitting.
A monkey?
Yeah, but a really wretched-looking one.
Yeah.
The text says it's disfigured with its ears, nose, and tail severed. Just a miserable sight.
Okay, why point that out? Hold that thought. Because the next stop is Tavatimsa heaven itself. And there, they see Saka, the king of the gods, being attended by 500 celestial nymphs. These apsaras.
500.
500. And they're described as having crane feet, which probably signifies extraordinary grace and beauty, maybe long, slender limbs. Think peak celestial beauty.
Right. So first the disfigured monkey, now these incredibly beautiful nymphs. What's the teacher doing?
He sets up a direct comparison. He turns to Nanda and asks him, point blank, Nanda, which is more beautiful, more pleasing, more attractive, your Sakyan princess, the one you can't stop thinking about, or these 500 celestial nymphs?
He really asks him to compare his fiancée to heavenly beings.
Directly, and Nanda's answer is immediate and pretty brutal, actually.
What does he say?
He says, basically, Venerable sir, compared to these nymphs, my princess is like that disfigured monkey we just saw.
Whoa.
Yeah. He says she doesn't even come close. Not in calculation, not a fraction, not any comparison. These nymphs are just so much more beautiful.
That is astonishing. He completely flips.
Instantly. The sheer divine beauty just overwhelms his previous attachment. And then the teacher makes his move. He offers Nanda a deal. A bargain.
A bargain? What kind of bargain?
He says, persevere, Nanda. Keep practicing. Stick with the holy life. I guarantee you, literally, I am your surety, I guarantee you the attainment of 500 celestial nymphs with crane feet.
He promises him the nymphs as a reward for being a monk.
He does. And Nanda, completely captivated by this new dazzling prospect, says, okay. If you guarantee it, venerable sir, I'll persevere. I'll gladly live the holy life.
I don't know what to say. That's amazing. He's basically been, well, bribed, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Bribed with heavenly pleasure to stay a monk. How does that fit with the goal of, liberation from desire?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It seems totally paradoxical. You're trying to get rid of desire by offering an even bigger, seemingly better desire.
Right. It feels like fighting fire with, well, a bigger, more celestial fire.
And this is where that concept of skillful means is absolutely crucial again. It's not that the teacher is endorsing desire, not at all. It's a very pragmatic strategy. He sees Nanda's mind is completely hooked on one specific thing, the princess.
Okay.
By offering what seems like a superior object of desire, the nymphs, he does two things. First, he gives Nanda a reason strong enough for him right now to let go of his current obsession. It breaks that immediate fixation.
It shifts his focus.
Exactly. And second, it motivates Nanda to actually engage in the practice, meditation, mindfulness, the discipline of the holy life. The teacher knows, or perhaps anticipates, that the practice itself is what will ultimately lead Nanda beyond all desire, including the desire for nymphs. It's a temporary scaffold, a means to an end.
So the promise is like bait on a hook, but the hook is actually spiritual practice.
That's a good way to put it. The bait gets him to bite, but it's the practice that reels him into liberation. It's definitely unconventional, though.
Definitely. Okay, so Nanda is now practicing diligently, but his motivation is, let's be honest, kind of mercenary. He wants those nymphs.
Oh.
What happens next? Does word get out about this deal?
Oh, it absolutely does. You can imagine the other monks hearing about this arrangement.
I bet they had some thoughts.
They did. They start to mock Nanda. They tease him, calling him a hireling or saying he's been bought, basically accusing him of living the holy life not for liberation, but just as a transaction to get these celestial women.
Ouch. That's gotta sting. Public ridicule.
And this, interestingly, becomes the real turning point for Nanda. Not the promise of nymphs, but the shame from the mockery.
Really? The shame.
Yes. The text says he felt distressed, ashamed, and disgusted by being called a hireling. That insult to his dignity, his sense of self-worth, that's what finally pushes him. He resolves right then, okay, no more of this. He decides to dedicate himself completely and wholeheartedly to the practice for its own sake. He retreats into solitude.
So the external motivation, the nymphs, got him started, but it was the internal reaction, the shame, that truly ignited his practice.
Precisely. The initial lure served its purpose, but it was this feeling of shame and the desire for genuine spiritual dignity that provided the final, decisive fuel.
And what happens when he applies himself like that, out of this new motivation?
The results are swift and dramatic. Through this diligent, focused effort, spurred by that sense of shame and resolve, Nanda quickly attains arhatship.
Arhatship. So full enlightenment, liberation.
Yes, the ultimate goal. All his defilements are destroyed, his mind is completely freed, his wisdom perfected. He makes that classic declaration of arrogance. Birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived, what was to be done has been done, there is no more returning to any state of being. He's done it.
Wow. From pining for his princess, to aiming for nymphs, to achieving full liberation because he was ashamed of being called a hireling. What a journey.
It really is extraordinary, and there's this nice detail where a deity, a diva, actually appears to the teacher to confirm, hey, Nanda's done it. He's an arahant. And the teacher, of course, also knows it directly through his own insight. It's like a double confirmation.
So now that he's an arahant, fully liberated, what about that promise, the 500 nymphs? Does he, go to collect?
No. What happens is Nanda goes back to the teacher. Very respectfully, he says, "Venerable sir, about that promise you made regarding the 500 celestial nymphs,
Yeah.
I release you from that promise."
He lets the teacher off the hook.
Exactly. The bargain is over, but because Nanda himself has transcended the very desire that fueled it.
And what did the teacher say to that?
His reply is very revealing. He says essentially, Nanda, I knew you'd reach liberation, and the moment your mind was freed from all attachments, that's the moment I was released from that promise too.
Ah, so the promise wasn't like a legal contract. It dissolved the instant it was no longer needed, the instant Nanda's mind was free.
Precisely. It shows the promise was always just a tool, a temporary measure, entirely dependent on Nanda's state of mind. The teacher then sums it all up with a verse, a beautiful one. He whose swamp of lust is crossed, whose thorn of lust is crushed, who has reached the destruction of delusion, he trembles not in pleasure and pain. Nanda is free.
That's incredibly profound.
Yeah.
So later on, the other monks are obviously noticing this massive change in Nanda. He was miserable, wanting to leave, and now he's clearly content, liberated, with zero desire for lay life. They must have been scratching their heads.
They were. They go to the teacher and point out this apparent contradiction. How can he be the same person? He was so discontented before, now he's completely free.
Yeah, how did he change so completely?
This is where the teacher uses that powerful analogy we mentioned earlier, the ill-thatched house.
Right. Tell us about that.
He explains Nanda's journey like this. Before, Nanda's mind was like an ill-thatched house. Think of a roof that's leaky, sparsely thatched, full of holes, the commentary says.
Okay, easy to picture.
Just like rain easily penetrates a leaky roof, the teacher says. Passion, and by extension, hatred, delusion, pride, all the defilements easily penetrates an undeveloped mind. A mind that lacks cultivation, that hasn't been worked on.
So Nanda's mind was leaky, vulnerable to desire.
Exactly. But now, after his dedicated practice and liberation, his mind is like a well-thatched house. It's well developed by tranquility and insight cultivation.
Solid, secure.
Right. And just as rain cannot penetrate a well-maintained, solid roof, passions can no longer penetrate a mind that is well developed, cultivated through practice. Nanda's mind is now impervious.
That's such a clear and powerful image. A leaky mind versus a weatherproof mind.
It really is, and the impact was huge. The text says that hearing this teaching, this analogy, led many of the monks and others present right then to attain various stages of enlightenment themselves. It was a deeply effective discourse.
Amazing. Now, the monks, they were still marveling at the whole nymph strategy, right? How the teacher used this lure.
They were. They found it quite extraordinary, as you'd expect. And the teacher then drops another bombshell. He reveals, this isn't the first time I've had to tame Nanda using the lure of a female.
Get out. This has happened before.
Yeah.
In a past life.
Yep. A recurring pattern across lifetimes.
Okay, you have to tell us this story.
Right. So the teacher recounts a past life. Ages ago, when a king Brahmadatta was ruling in Varanasi, the teacher himself was born as a barber who also worked as a merchant. And he owned this donkey.
A donkey? Okay.
And this donkey was a real workhorse. It used to carry these heavy potloads for 7 yojanas a day. That's a really long distance. Hard work.
Sounds like it.
So one day, they're in the city of Taxila, and the donkey meets a female donkey, a she-donkey.
Uh-oh. It sends trouble.
You guessed it. This female donkey starts talking to him, pretending to be sympathetic. Oh, you poor thing. Such hard work. Doesn't anyone give you, foot rubs or back massages, sweet-talking him, playing on his fatigue?
Laying it on thick.
Totally. And the male donkey falls for it. He gets all discontented, thinking, yeah, my life is hard. She's right. He refuses to work, refuses to go back with the merchant, just downs tools, basically.
Donkey strike.
Pretty much. So the merchant, the future Buddha, first tries threatening him. Look, if you don't work, I'm going to get a huge thorny goad, 16 fingers long, and I'll tear your hide apart. Tough talk.
Does that work?
Nope. The donkey basically says, go ahead. I'll just throw the load off my front, throw it off my back. I don't care. He's defiant.
Stubborn as a well,
Exactly. So the merchant realizes, okay, threats aren't working. It must be that female donkey causing this. Right. He changes tactics.
Does he offer him heavenly nymphs this time?
Not quite, but similar principle. He promises the donkey a wife. He says, okay, if you work hard, I'll get you a beautiful wife, 4-legged, conch-mouthed, whatever that means, probably very attractive donkey lips, beautiful in every way.
He promises him a donkey bride.
He does. And the donkey, he's ecstatic. Really, you promise. He immediately says, okay, I'll travel not just 7 yojanas, I'll do 14 more. He's suddenly super motivated.
Hilarious. The promise works again.
It does. But then later, the donkey comes back and says, okay, boss, where's my beautiful wife you promised me?
Right, time to pay up.
And the merchant gives him this very clever, slightly evasive answer. He says, look, I can get you a wife, sure, but finding one who will be satisfied only with you, and then, when you have offspring, maybe just with you and your sons, that's difficult.
Yeah.
Very expensive to maintain. He basically points out the complications and potential unsatisfactoriness of donkey relationships.
He sows doubt about the very thing he promised.
Exactly. And the donkey thinks about it and immediately loses all interest. Just like that. Desire gone.
Wow. So who was who in this story?
Well, the teacher reveals the enticing female donkey. That was the Sakian princess in a past life.
Nanda's fiancée.
Makes sense.
The hardworking but easily swayed male donkey. That was Nanda.
And the clever barber merchant who used the promise of a female to motivate him and then skillfully deflated the desire. That was the teacher himself.
Incredible. So this pattern, Nanda being susceptible to female allure, The teacher using that very allure skillfully to guide him, it stretches way back.
It really does. It underscores the deep continuity of our karmic tendencies and also the incredible patience and skill involved in guiding someone towards liberation, lifetime after lifetime.
Okay, let's try and unpack this whole journey then. Nanda's story is just extraordinary, isn't it? From being literally moments away from marriage to achieving complete spiritual freedom.
And driven by such surprising, even seemingly contradictory motivations along the way.
Right. It really shows, I think, that the path to genuine change isn't always straightforward. Sometimes, maybe often, it starts with something that looks superficial on the surface, like a worldly incentive, a lure.
That nymph promise being the prime example.
Exactly. But that initial, maybe even lower motivation can paradoxically become the very thing that kicks off the journey towards transcending it entirely. It's not really about manipulation, is it? It's more about meeting someone exactly where they are at that moment.
Understanding their current hooks, their current motivations, however immature they might seem, and using that as the starting point. Gently guiding them, using that energy towards something higher.
Yeah. And if we connect that back to the bigger picture, that ill-thatched house analogy is just so resonant, isn't it?
It really sticks with you.
It tells us that building like mental and emotional resilience isn't just about willpower, about gritting your teeth and suppressing desires. It's more fundamental. It's about actually developing the structure of the mind itself.
Like reinforcing the roof beams and patching the hole.
Exactly, so that the rain of passion or anger or whatever simply can't get in and cause havoc anymore. It's an internal renovation project, not just constantly mopping the floor.
Well put. And the whole narrative, including the donkey story, really highlights this timeless truth about desire itself, doesn't it?
How so?
That maybe its ultimate satisfaction isn't found in getting what you want, but in seeing it clearly for what it is, whether it's a princess or nymphs or even a donkey mate.
Seeing its limits, its impermanence.
Yes. Seeing the whole picture, the relative inadequacy, the transient nature of these worldly attractions, paradoxically, really understanding the object of your desire can be the key that unlocks you from its grip. It leads to a different kind of satisfaction, freedom from the desire.
Which is a much deeper, more lasting kind of freedom.
Absolutely. And that perhaps leads to a final thought for you listening right now.
Yeah.
What are the things driving us today? What seemingly external motivations, what promises maybe of success or comfort or recognition are pulling us along?
Good question.
And could really looking at them, understanding their true nature, maybe their limitations, their impermanence, could that lead us towards a deeper, more authentic, more lasting kind of fulfillment? What does it really mean for you right now to cultivate a well-thatched mind in this world that's constantly throwing new desires, new storms our way?